everybody out there. Sam Dennehy. This is Halfass Presents the podcast, and today's special guest is Daniel Coombs, model railroader, and I guess pretty well known in the model railroading video world for being a co-host and one of the crew of Ken Patterson's What's Neat This Week. So that's our guest today. Hope you enjoy the podcast. I think he's a pretty cool guy for being a young adult and into this hobby. And I'd like to get to know more about Daniel. So hope you guys like it. Stay tuned.
All right.
Hey, everybody out there in YouTube. This is Sam Dennehy, aka Halfass Customs, and this is Halfass Presents the podcast. Today's special guest is Daniel Coombs. He's pretty well known in the model railroading world to help out Ken Patterson's What's Neat show and just a model railroader in general. Daniel, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got in this hobby?
Hey, thanks, Sam, for letting me be on your show tonight. It's a real honor. So I got started at the age of 5 years old. You know, it's Christmas morning. You come downstairs, you see what Santa brought you. And as being a little kid, you're like, oh, okay, I wonder if there's any, big boxes or really big presents. Because, you don't, as a kid, you don't like the small stuff. You actually want the big grand finale. And it was that there was a big box in the corner of my old house in the living room. And my parents are kind of like, don't open. And then, of course, I'm opening it. And what I see, it was a model train set. It was an Athearn ready to roll that had a CSX locomotive, 3 cars, caboose, loop, a track, power pack. Just a general train set to get anyone started in the hobby.
Right.
So then it kind of progressed on from there. I also got an expansion pack that Bachman made, and they had a DVD on how to build your first model railroad with a 4x8 sheet of plywood. That was hosted by, many of you guys would know, Michael Gross, the well-known actor. He's also a big-time train enthusiast, model railroad guy, and he hosted that DVD on how to build your first model railroad. And I believe it was Kalmbach Model Railroading, the publishing company, Kalmbach Publishing, with Model Railroader magazine, that they had a master model railroader. I think his name was Dick Cecil at that time. It was like in the early 2000s, going over how to build your first 4x8 sheet of layout. So with my dad being as crafty as he was, built the benchwork, put the foam on, built the track, and then boom, that's how I got started.
That's a cool little story. I'll tell you. So I've only interviewed 3, and I think you're the 4th young adult into the model hobby, model in general, like model cars, trains, whatever, models in general. And it's so neat to listen to their bringing up on how they got into it, because they all have their own stories, but it's definitely the love and the passion for modeling, whether it's trains, cars, or RC planes or whatever. They have the passion, which seems like, and I'll say you're a rarity in the world, they have the passion to build stuff, which a lot of little kids or young adults don't anymore, because everything's so technically advanced with phones and computers. What do you think, being a young adult, drove you into sticking with it? Because you could have just got it as a toy for Christmas as a kid, but most people grow out of it. Most young adults would grow out of it and do whatever. What kept you into it, you think?
I don't know. It was just I guess the aspect of actually having something that was my own and my brother's. I got 2 younger brothers. I couldn't touch it. I think that's what kind of drawn me into the point of, okay, this is actually mine. What can I go do with it? How can I, expand it? How can I go beyond? And before I got that set, I forgot to mention earlier, it was Thomas and Friends. That's what got me, watching the old VHS tapes and seeing those trains with the faces. At that point to where I was like, oh, this is a neat show, and I was 3, of course, 2 years old at the time. And I got almost every DVD and every book. And as a kid, we would go on our summer vacations. We'd go to a train museum here or another train thing over here. We've done many museums. I've done many museums around the country in general. But what made me stick with it was I thought to myself, I wasn't a guy involved with any kind of school sports or recreation stuff like that. I was just kind of that kid liking trains. I was made fun of. Okay, I'll be upfront with that. Made fun of for it. As time moved on, I got older, got into middle school. I became more and more involved, and I just all of a sudden thought to myself, you know what? I'm hooked. I got the disease is what they call it, but it's in
Yeah,
a good
it is.
way because it keeps me out of trouble. It keeps me doing something. So, and to this day now, I'm
And
20 years old. So,
and they say so. I've also come from the Hot Wheels collecting and customizing side of the hobby, and the funniest and more well-known saying in the Hot Wheels side is, I could be wasting my money on so many other things, but this won't get me in trouble. This won't end up making me dead in the next 5 years or something. I
right,
won't lose all the money I've ever made on this hobby
of
because
course,
it's cheap enough, and you can, just like trains. Trains isn't necessarily cheap, but if you figure out how to navigate it, you can afford it without
exactly.
killing yourself and breaking the bank,
Mm-hmm.
unless you want to break the bank.
Oh, very few situations I want to break the bank.
Right. So that's really cool. That I'll say that's really neat because I had a train set when I was younger. I always liked trains. I just never loved trains, and I always, honestly, when I grew up, wanted to be a train driver when I was young,
Right.
engineer, conductor.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Um, and then I grew up and realized that I don't want to do that. But I don't want to do that on today's engines. I would rather do that on a steam engine. Steam engines are my era of
Yeah, go way back in the day.
train engines. Yeah. Yeah. Even if I was a coal shoveler, if I was on that cab in the steam engine driving down the track, I think that would be the neatest experience of anybody's life, and a
Well, I mean,
hardworking one at that.
right. There was a lot to it. I mean, and that's why, of course, the railroads got rid of them. And I
Right.
tell people that are not necessarily train enthusiasts, because some of my friends even ask me, well, why did they get rid of the old steam trains? And I told them it's like you got a lot of moving parts, metal and metal. You got, gears. You've got connecting rods. And it was
Numerous
just so
knobs to
much, but
twist.
right, numerous things, and you actually had to know exactly when to twist this
Oh
knob over
yeah,
here to throw in what the atom, like an atomizer, or you had to know
because
how
it's a
much water.
rolling bomb if you don't know how
Exactly,
to do it.
exactly. And trust,
And a
I have
diesel
not.
engine isn't a rolling
Yes,
bomb.
right. Not to say I don't ever want to see one. I have only seen pictures of steam engines that have blown up in the past, like on movie, TV shows, documentaries, and of course in the books or literature,
Right.
stuff like that.
Yeah, that's the only way I would probably be in that world of trains. In fact, in a small city of Williams, Arizona, it's 50 miles
Yes.
south of the Grand Canyon. They have the
Mm-hmm.
steam train excursion that takes you to the Grand Canyon. And I never rode on it, but when we were moving out here from California to North Carolina, we just so happened to pass over the bridge as it was coming underneath the bridge.
Oh wow,
And
perfect
I didn't
timing.
realize, yeah, and I know they leave at 6 in the morning and come back at 6 in the evening. And I
Right.
thought, how awesome would that be to work for that company as a retired person, so you don't have to worry about getting paid as long as your social security is good, but work for that railroad as a retiree and just be there every day in that city while that horn's blowing at 9 in the morning, at 6 in the evening as it comes back. That'd
Every
be
time,
awesome.
and to this day, going back with that, we've also went to the Grand Canyon. I think it was we took a family vacation. We were out of town for 2 weeks on the West Coast. I think it was just 4 years ago. I was a sophomore in high school. Well, I was a sophomore coming out, going to be a junior that next fall, and we did a California first couple of days. Then we went to Grand Canyon for a couple of days. We, of course, took the train up there to the south. We were on the South Rim,
Nice.
went to Vegas. But now I'll tell you, that trip was seeing the Grand Canyon train. Oh my gosh, was I blown away. Now, of course, being a
That's the
train nut,
epitome of the Wild Wild West excursion.
yes, I know. It was pretty neat. And of course, the shirt I'm wearing, that's where I got this shirt from California. We're actually at one of the model railroad museums there in La Mesa. There were different scale railroads that they had in Balboa Park. That's what it is. San Diego, California, Balboa Park.
Yeah.
They had two HL scale like master layouts replicating 1950s or the 70s, 80s, so on and so forth to if I say it right, Tehachapi Pass, Tehachapi, thank you.
Yeah.
Tehachapi, the Cajon Pass. They also had an O scale 3-rail club, and they had a lot of other layouts. And of course, back then, still, I was always excited to be around trains, and to the point where my folks were like, all right, we need to get going. And as much as I hated to leave, I was like, all right, fine, if we gotta leave, gotta leave. I've been here for like 2 hours, just, almost like if
drooling.
I was a kid. right, just hands up on the plexiglass, just watching the trains and not, wanting to leave. And then going to the Grand Canyon, that was actually a very cool experience. And of course, that was my few times. That was another excursion train that we've rode, or another tourist railroad that we rode on. And I was, of course, being technical, and I was reading a newspaper that they had on one of the passenger cars as we were traveling up to to the south rim of the Grand Canyon on the way. I read in the paper that they were former Amtrak units, that they had basically bought from Amtrak when they sold the F40 PHs. And those are those little 4-axle over the road. They were well known to Amtrak fans, and all train enthusiasts know what the F40s are. They were one of Amtrak's best engines. The Grand Canyon bought a couple of them. They pretty much rebuilt them. So they stripped it all down to the bare frame. Then they had to remodify it to where it can't go the full 110 miles per hour it could on Amtrak's roster. They had to downgrade it down to an 80 mile per hour system. Now you're asking, how do I know this? Well, funny story. We're at the diner getting ready to leave from being there for, I think we were like 3 days up there on the South Rim. As we're sitting there eating dinner, my dad looks over, taps on me, and says, "You might want to go talk to those two gentlemen over there in the 2 plaid shirts." One guy had train crew on his hat, and of course they had a radio. So I thought, I might want to go up and ask them. And all of a sudden, I introduced myself, told them I like trains, and they looked at me and said, "Yeah, you're probably going to be running your train here." And they said, "You live around here?" I'm like, "No." They're like, "How old are you, 15? They said, "Well, why don't you move here? When you're turning 18, you can start working on the railroad." I'm like,
that's awesome.
Oh, my gosh, if I was 18 at that point,
got a volunteered internship right there.
That would have been my dream.
I think that would have been most people's dreams. I mean,
I know.
Just to be asked out, like you didn't even have to search for it. They said, "Hey, we want you."
Exactly.
That's really, man, that would be cool. If you didn't need money, like to live, move out there now and join that railroad and work on it. That'd be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So, now that I just told you my passion of the train side of the hobby, what is your passion on the train side of the hobby? I mean, besides like you like trains, but what trains do you like? Where do you lay your layout? What would it be when you're completely finished, and how would you like it?
Okay. So going on with that, I pretty much, many modelers and a couple of guys at the What's Neat show say model what you see. And of course, Ken's told me that before. I basically model somewhat 1970s or the modern day Union Pacific. So I kind of mix in the many years. Reason for that is, if you know the Pacific Fruit Express train, that was a well-known train. I think it was originated in the 30s. And it was a joint effort between Southern Pacific and UP way before, of course, the merger of the Southern Pacific and the UP system. They had what they called the Coal Block Reefer Express, and that transport perishable goods. In the 1970s, they had these 57-foot mechanical reefers, PFE, UPFE, and did many different colors, sizes, and whatever. I was at one of the local train shows here a couple years back before all this COVID stuff happened. And I sat down in one of the booths, not sat down, but I was looking, and I see this orange Union Pacific SPF car. And I was like, okay, what is this thing? I got on my phone real quick, looked it up. I'm thinking, oh, you know what? The guy's got it for $8. Why not? It was an after blue box kit. He had metal wheels. Great. So that kind of got me started. So now I got about 25 of those cars, and I'm still trying to collect more to, make a gigantic long train as it was back in the 1970s. But going on with that, we got Union Pacific that runs through St. Louis. We got the Burlington Northern Santa Fe. We got many other different railroads. But the reason why I chose Union Pacific, back in 2011, before Steve Lee left the UP Steam program, I got to see the 844 for my very first time. And I had only seen it before that time going up there downtown. When it came through, I think they were on an excursion run. I had only seen it in the movies, the pictures, the books. And I thought to myself, you know what? As cool as the steam engine is, I need to just model this particular railroad. The fact that, oh crap, I just lost my train of thought.
What I do that all the time. Don't feel bad.
I know, me too.
I do that in mid conversation with somebody, like, where were we going and what were we talking about?
Right.
I was asking kind of what era you model and why you model it, and that was kind of what started you saying what you like about the Union Pacific and what time era you're modeling. Does that help?
Yeah.
Really.
Okay, so we're gonna pick back up here. Train's back on the track. So I decided, you know what? I like the look of the Union Pacific colors on the diesels and whatever. I've also favored the old 6-axle EMD. So you're talking SD40 road powers. Of course, I got a few little 6-axles here on my layout, and as it is in front of me, and you can also see it kind of behind me there, the blue foam. So I just decided to model that. I could have modeled all the railroads, but with that railroad having a steam engine and a steam program going, I thought, okay, that's going to be it. That's it.
Yeah, because you can have both the steam and the diesel
correct
side by side, because the steam would only be using for excursions and diesel would be using for everyday.
Yeah, everyday commute service.
Yeah. That's cool. That's a really neat idea, because I don't know that a lot of people that model modern day layouts or models think about that, because I think, and I don't know a lot of train modelers, but what it looks like when you see it at a train show or whatever, they're going by year. So say 1920 to 1940, you know, and so that's all you're going to see is 99% of, steam engines on the layout or whatever. And I don't think they're looking at what could possibly be present in the past. They're just looking at, a 20-year gap or a 10-year gap, or worst case scenario, 5-year, gap in the train layout. And I think seeing what you're doing, you said from like the 70s on up or whatnot, that is a perfect time frame for anything modern and anything somewhat old and anything really old like steam engines, because they're refurbishing these and making them run today. And you can see them on YouTube everywhere.
Oh, yes, awesome. They are everywhere. In fact, with the 4014 being restored, that is, I believe, one of the largest steam engines to ever be resurrected from, I think, the largest, idle in a museum collecting dust and rusting out.
I mean, so the Challenger was the largest before that Big Boy was restored.
Yes, it was.
And I actually saw the Challenger run.
Really?
It was it was during the Clinton Bush inauguration. They were having some kind of convention at the LA railroad station, and they brought the Challenger from the high desert where it was staying overnight. I don't know where it came from before then. It was somewhere in the Midwest, I'm assuming. But they stayed in the high desert overnight and watered it up and everything. And I got there like 6 o'clock in the morning. We followed it down Route 66 along the train track and watched this damn train. I ran out. My gas light came on 3/4 of the trip in. I couldn't follow it any further than that because I got gas and I completely lost it. And that was right as the internet was like starting to be a useful thing, but we didn't have cell phones then because this was in the mid to late 90s. So it wasn't a smartphone that you could just look up Google Maps and see where the railroad was going. Once you got gas and you got off that main road, there's no telling where it went.
Of course, yeah.
But yeah, it was so cool. That was a sight to see. It was, I don't know what you call that, but I was a train follower for that day. It was really cool. Well, along with 100 other cars that were in the same procession, following that thing.
Exactly. Yep.
And another neat thing too, along with the, I guess, automobile oil side of the hobby, is Williams, Arizona has Route 66 running right through it.
Yes, they
So
do.
you got the car side and the train side all in the same city.
Yeah, they're mixed
Perfect
in. They're
city.
mixed in one.
Yeah, it's a perfect city. So I guess the next question is, you model, say 70s to current, what part of the modeling, what part of the layout, what part of the hobby do you like the most? Do you like collecting the train and running it, or do you actually like building the actual train, doing all the like James Regier type electronics and the Mike Buddy weathering, or do you mostly just like buying the train, set it, let it run, and then you do all the scenery kind of stuff for layout, or is it everything?
I would go 70% with the electronics, and the rest of that percentage is everything else. And going on with that, like you said, James Regier Electronics. Now, Brandon, I have done many DC installs, and with me growing, and I tell folks this, with this technology, while the time I was growing up with it, it's like we all of a sudden become, we don't have to be trained on how to do this. For example, it's like my father, granted, is about in his 60s. When he got his first smartphone, he didn't know how to use it. And being 12 years old, it's like, oh, no brainer. That's easy. And then he will give me a look of, how did you figure that out? It's like,
right.
I just grew up with it, We got used to it.
Exactly.
So I have also fell in love with doing DCC installs and also locomotive repairs as being a mechanic full-time in an auto diesel dealership. So I just kind of feel like that also, my career crosses into doing the train electronic installs, because I'm doing some of the same things at work, diagnosing and repairing the vehicles. Whereas, okay, if maybe one of my friends says, hey, this engine's acting up or the electronics aren't working well, okay, I can go and test it, use a voltmeter and test electronics, be like, oh, there's a broken wire here, or oh, this is a bad LED here.
Yeah. And so I worked at a few car dealerships at the beginning of my working career, never as a mechanic and never as a car dealer, or not a car dealer, a car salesman, but everything else, parts, warehouse, a body shop, everything. And yeah, I know what those guys go through. They have their little tools, they have their meters, they can see, but I don't know, because I know we do it in the hobby. They don't solder the wires back together though, do they? Or they just go buy a whole new wiring harness or something, or just that piece, just that section to replace it. They're not like literally repairing broke wires in your field. I don't know.
No, not much anymore. They pretty much just say, well, we got to order that new part, or if we got to do like a recall on a component on the vehicle, they give us like these splices, or the butt connector is what they call them. It's where you put the two wires in together, and it's a little circular tube, and it's very, very small. It's about like that big. You put the two wires in, you're supposed to crimp it down. They're supposed to lock in, and then you just take a lighter and it's like shrink wrap. It's supposed to adhere to the wire and prevent any moisture and stuff getting through, so that it's a tight seal to it.
So yeah, that makes sense in a bigger scale, one scale, obviously, and they don't probably have that kind of tooling in a much smaller HO, Ed scale, O scale, S scale type of situation, because the wires are so much smaller. So yeah, so in our scale, we would just solder everything together or tape it or whatever, electrical tape it. Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, I get what you're saying. It does definitely cross over, because you can, especially with a diesel engine to like electrical motorized, train scale engine, some of the components and the know-how, besides needing gas and all that other stuff, you just switch the gas to electricity, kind of plays in the same way if you wanted to repair an engine or something for a model train set. All my stuff, my little cars I build are just plastic resin, and the engines are all solid, so there's no moving components. It's just detail work I do.
Exactly.
So I don't have to worry about that electrical stuff, not yet.
Not yet. Well, it's coming. Be prepared.
It is coming. I know. I talked to Joshua Barton the other probably like 2 weeks ago, and he was talking about yeah, that's kind of like the next step is the RC cars, kind of like Wonderland in Germany's got like their whole layouts full of RC cars set on a track and a path and whatnot. And he says, and a lot of other interviews that I've been doing is saying that's kind of the future. So you got the trains that have been moving for, 100 years of the hobby, but the cars don't move yet. And now that we're finally getting cars to move, now we're going to fill up a whole entire layout of moving cars. And then the next step will get moving people. And then, who knows what's next.
No above and beyond that. That is beyond me at this point.
Yeah, no, the moving cars are beyond me. I don't need my cars to move, but I'm building mostly just dioramas and like these modules back here. It's just to set something on the show. I don't need anything to move on it. So I do find that kind of in the HO or just in the model train world, it does always seem to bug me that the only thing on the layout that moves is the train. So you're literally taking, like if you're going to take a picture of it, you're taking a still shot. You don't even need the train to be moving, period. You just stop the train, turn the electricity off of the train itself, and take the picture of where you want it. You don't need it to move. If you're doing photography, you see like Ken Patterson's, master photographies that he does. He doesn't technically need the train to even move if he's going to take a picture, because with the editing software that's out there, you can make it look like the train's moving and the cars are just still with the blurriness, and the train never had to move to begin with. But that's always bugged me. Like that's the only thing that moves on a whole entire layout is the train and nothing else. So it looks like the town is fake with the only thing real is the train, no matter how much detail you put in it. And I don't know, I Wonderland has definitely bridged that gap, but I wish it was a lot more accessible, a lot more cheaper, and it could be like made for dummies. Like even our senior citizens that can't figure out, a smartphone can figure out, oh, it just has a cord and it plugs into an outlet and now everything's moving. Something so simple and easy as that. But even like Woodland Scenic's lighting kits, it's plug and play, but it may not be just as simple from that plug to get it wired up to your layout as it would be to, maybe a younger person or whatever. So as easy as it is, it may still not be as easy for other people. And I wish there was this Wonderland technology that was plug and play and cheap, where you can buy a building and half the people are literally moving inside the building or doing whatever.
Well, it is possible in the O-scale 3-rail. NCH was one to make all those action accessories. Well, Lionel too, granted. Those were the top two that made all those, animated scenes. Like MCH, for example, made a fire station scene where you've got guys, like you said, sliding down a pole. You got the alarms going off. And you also got the garage door opening up and the fire truck just pulling out, making all the sounds and the effects. And then just like when it's at the end of its sequence, when the fire's out, so to speak, the fire truck backs in, the door closes back, and everything goes back to normal. And then basically the accessory shuts off from there.
That's cool. They need to transfer that technology into a smaller scale for HO.
In HO, right. Right. I would like to see
that. And then the next step, N scale, but that might be overdoing it.
Yeah, that's probably way more in the future.
I mean, those people in N scale are like this tiny. So if you saw the movie, it looked like they just fell over or something.
Right.
But yeah, I think that's definitely the next step in this hobby. And I think in order to get more layouts to be realistic and have moving parts, they need to figure out how to get that technology more out there and accessible.
Well, it's based off what you want to see. Everyone models a different way. And like you said, everyone models, like there's a guy who does the bench work, a guy does the scenery, guy like me that does all the electronics, the wiring. And I can do a lot of rough construction, but doing the doing the fine details, what we call the rivet counters. So if you got a locomotive, so for example, this Athearn Genesis, and the Genesis line is pretty much their one that is for the customer that wants, all the specific details. You've got the lift rings on the top, the fine detail, the handrails, and then the different hoses here on the front, the coupler cut levers, stuff like that. I like those models, but again, I'm not one to freak out over it if a detail part's missing. As long as it runs and works just fine and sounds great, I'm all for it.
And looks decent, yeah. Because if, you can get, I don't know how Bachmann used to be back in like the 80s and probably 90s, where it's like the base model that you would want to add every other detail part to. Yeah, you don't want to buy something like that and it look like a toy. It has to look good, run, and sound good. Yeah, makes sense. I mean, that's just like when you buy like the accessories. Woodland Scenics is really push the volume up for pre-made buildings that are weathered and has their lights all in it and everything. So you just have to buy it. Like Ken showed on a previous episode of his show a couple weeks ago, or just last week, maybe, I don't know, where it's literally just plug and play. You buy it, you set it on your layout, you plug it in, and the whole thing is done. You don't have to do nothing else to it. That's awesome. It's great that the company is finally seeing, there is a need for that, and they're trying to build as many or create as many designs and products as they can for that one thing.
Of course. I find it's also a benefit for all those gentlemen who are just trying to catch up with the technology today, like Mike Buddy, for instance. He's straight DC. He likes to turn it up, turn it down. Well, we finally broke him into DCC because I actually did three of them. He's a big Frisco fan, and so I did 3 of his engines, put all the LED lights, the soundtrack sound, and put the speakers in there, put on Ken's layout. He looks at me and says, all right, I want to transition. I'm ready. I'm ready to jump into this. You're back. He was like, I ain't touching that. I ain't touching it. And it's like, oh, come on. You're not going to hurt it. Just here you go. Here's the cell phone throttle, right? That's another thing. Wi-Fi. In today's world, and it's going to go beyond to where at the point where you get like voice activation. So, for example, with the chip voice activation, you'd be like, you talk to the train, you give it like a basic command, like, let's say, train move forward at 10 miles per hour scale speed. Okay, it's moving. Train blow horn in grade crossing sequence, the 2 long, the short, middle, long, while it's going through the crossing, So he's finally excited with that. We got him a system. I got to head over to his house to set it up on his layout, and that'll probably be a future episode of What's to Eat. But again, that is still to be determined.
Right. Yeah, no, I know Ken's like, not Ken, Mike. I love Mike so much for his passion for cars and just who he is. He's just such a nice guy and everything, and all the work he does for everybody. I don't know what work he does for you guys in the train world, but for us car guys, he helps us a lot. And so he's just such a cool guy, and it's super cool when you see or when you watch Ken's episodes, and little by little trickles in that, oh yeah, we got Mike this, and next week we're going to do this, and oh we're at that point now, and now we're going to look forward to this. And it's like Mike's little world is slowly becoming up to date.
It's starting to emerge.
It's a slow process, but it's going to get there. But it's funny because what if we get to the present, and by that time it's 5 years later, and now there's a whole new system that needs to be updated again.
Right.
You never know.
Right. Well, what he does to us model railroaders, the auto racks. The auto rack work he makes. Now, I don't know if you saw in the last one, I think it was a couple shows back, he took a long boxcar, HO scale boxcar, Southern Pacific, and he basically took a Dremel, ripped off the side.
Oh, yeah.
And modeled it to where with his aluminum foil trick.
Right.
Damn, I tell you what. Genius. When we just had that last show come out, that last monthly show, I think it was let's see, we're in April now. I think it was March. Yeah, it was March. He did the tinfoil with the cars crushed.
Yeah.
Because he also says that he loves wrecked auto loads. He loves like wrecked vehicle, and he's got like a scrapyard scene where all the vehicles are wrecked, but you can do it with the aluminum foil. Then what he did with that boxcar was like a train just completely came in on the side, hit it on the side, and just completely sheared off the end of that car. I tell you what, looking at it, I'm like, Mike, it looks like you just literally melted the plastic because there's no way that's aluminum foil. And he would look at me and say, well, you're wrong. It is aluminum foil. I'm just that good to hide all the, imperfections.
Well, yeah, the aluminum foil allows you to have those super crisp creases when heating it up or melting it would just turn into a blob.
Right.
You'd have bubbled creases, and that allows you to have these deep, detailed, jagged edges like a really wrecked piece of metal would look.
Mm-hmm.
And that was genius. I mean, I don't know where he figured to do that idea, if he came up with it himself or if he got it from one of the model magazines from years ago or whatever. But the idea of doing that is just amazing. Because you can do it with the automobiles, you can do it with the trains, you can do it with anything in the hobby. If you were doing model airplanes, you can do model airplanes, you can do model boats, you can do anything as long as you understand how to use it and, learn how to, fine detail that effect.
Right. I hear you.
I was just on the TV the other day. I was watching that movie about it's not Is it called Unstoppable?
Is that the one with Denzel Washington and Chris Pine?
Denzel Washington, yeah.
Yes, that is the Unstoppable movie.
Yeah, okay. And I was telling my wife, this is based on a true story. Obviously, Hollywood has to put their spin on it and make it more probably dramatic, and ridiculous. Because I don't think that on that trestle at the end of the movie, that train was tipping over and then came back on all fours basically and landed perfectly. I don't know that it might have. I didn't see the live news recap on that, when it happened. So that is definitely a Hollywood thing to do, to give it more dramaticness and more, action. But yeah, even that you can, because Denzel Washington was running this train that probably had like 4 or 5 cars, and it had to go on the turnoff so that runaway train could miss it, and it hits the back of the last car. And as a model railroader or just a hobby builder in general, that scene right there would have been a neat scene to just capture. Not that you could do it over and over again on your layout, because you would have to have a brand new car with just the whole rear end be tinfoil and just that train run into it. But just if you could figure out how to do that, it would be neat to one full rotation of the train, that whole scene reacts and does it the same thing again. I don't know. That's just me. I think it would be.
No, I hear you. And like I said, I can't do that detail work. So if I look at Mike to say, all right, here we go. We'll do an exchange. I'll help you with the electronics.
Right.
If you can help me do the modeling, help me wreck a freight car if you want to.
I was talking to Ken, and I've told Mike this several times, and I even told Joshua. I said, you got your little group, your little St. Louis and surrounding little towns group of people. You got Vic Smith out there, and you got other people, Rice Campbell. You guys are all out there, and maybe it's just because that show really focuses on the few people that are constantly on the show every week to I don't know what I'm trying to say by this, but your little area has a good group of people that have different strengths in different areas and that can constantly help each other grow and make this hobby better. And it's so neat, because I kind of want to retire and move out there too. Just to be close to you guys.
There's many places you can go to. Come on ahead.
Because there's in the model car world, with the little HO scale cars, there's nobody out here doing this. I'm the only guy, and then I don't have any hobby shops out here, so everything is online ordered or whatever. Gotcha. But out there, Ken's, every once in a few while finding a new hobby store and promoting it on a show. And there's the train museum, the train automotive museum out there, and there's so much stuff. And then there's all these modelers. It's just crazy, and they're good modelers. It's not like you got a bunch of beginners that don't know what the heck they're doing, and they're all located in the same place, and you have a YouTube channel. No, you guys are all really, really good, and it's so neat to see, weekly installments of, Rice Campbell's layout or your layout or Joshua's layout. It's so neat to see the progress, because I don't follow, or I don't know if, a lot of you guys are posting on the train groups on Facebook, like once a day or once a week or something of your progress. There's so many people on these groups that it's hard to just see one person's progress when you could have posted something at 7 in the morning and then by 7 at night, there's been 400 posts that's, come in after that. So
it's crazy.
So hard to see stuff.
Going on with the hobby shops, I believe, well, one thing is, and I know most of the people know that I work part-time now at one of the hobby stores here in St. Louis, up in St. Charles, Missouri, which is a town about 35 minutes, or I should say a city, about 35 minutes to the north. As a part-time job, there's a cashier. So we got the RC, the model kits, model cars, stuff like that. We also got the trains. And of course, that's a department I specialize in, is trains.
I'd hope
it's like
so.
The other day, I was working and I had a gentleman approach me, and he said, "Oh, I see you on What's Neat." And he was asking a DCC decoder question, or he was just wanting to chat about it. And I looked at him and I kind of, spilled out my information of what that decoder was, and then after the sound engine he was trying to replace. And he looked at me and was like, "How do you get that?" He says, "Yeah," he called George Bogatalk up at Soundtracks. And then he looks at me and he says, "I tell you what, though, between you and George, you guys helped me out a lot." I mean, with George,
That's
of course,
awesome.
being the guy who's making the product and actually selling it and then going to the shows, that he's one of the main support guys up there at Soundtracks. And the fact that I'm up there, I'm pretty much the guy who knows a lot of the electronic know-how in the train department specifically. And another example is another gentleman came by at the end of the day and he asked, "Hey, I got this new Digitrax DCC system that came out that they recently announced. I'm having trouble with it. It's given, an audio tone of like, I think 4 beeps." And of course, looked on the manual and in 4 beeps. Okay. And I looked on the troubleshooting guide. It said track down the wires. So I looked at them and said, "You might want to trace back your wires, because one of them could just be loose enough to where there's a lot of resistance build up to where the current's not flowing through. And maybe it's just arcing just a little bit and setting a short circuit off to the command station saying, 'Hey, we're not completing the circuit here. It's a short to ground. The electricity flow is returning back without going to the complete circuit.'" And he looked at me and he's like, "Okay, I'll go try that." And I said, "Yes, sir. But, if you have any more questions, you got to get a hold of Digitrax otherwise, because it could be a faulty equipment, but I just said, just trace back your wires. Okay. And then go on from there with it."
That's pretty neat. The fact that you're knowledgeable enough to be able to help people out like that, just you telling that little tiny story gave me an idea for you in the What's Neat show. I wonder if Ken would be graciously enough, and maybe if you even want to do it, because this is going to be up to you, really. If Ken would say at the end of every episode, "And if you have any electrical questions about your layout that you're having issues with, hit up so and so," which would be you, and then he can give you, like, for everybody that maybe calls you off of hearing that, he can give you like $5 a call or something. I don't know.
No, I don't know. Look, and like I have many people today. I was actually at a gentleman's house looking at stuff because he's like, "I'm having trouble with all this," and I'm like, "All right, well, tell you what, we'll work something out and I'll help you do the decoder installs." And it was a bunch of old Ather Blue Box engines, which there's many YouTube videos that I'm starting to see now with this pandemic happening. And at the start of it, everyone was stuck inside, it's like, what else to do? But maybe get a model train, RC car, model kit, something like that. Because working at the hobby store, I started last September, and I have seen that there would be an increase in sales in the general hobby world. And all the train stores around are getting sold out of their product. The manufacturers are getting overwhelmed. Well, it's a good thing, because then, they're making their business, they're making their nickels and dimes. Now, I know of some circumstances they might be short-staffed a little bit, but beyond that, I mean, the hobby industry overall has thrived. And I think I pulled a statistic. I saw somewhere that I think it was the NMRA, or there was just a general saying around to us model railroaders that I think everyone that was stuck inside trying to get a train set and trying to get started around Christmas time too, it shot up 2 times above the normal level that it would be at without this,
easy
pandemic happening.
Which is crazy, because I've said this in other episodes. So this is like a 2-part thing I'm going to tell you. Back when the pandemic first happened, I think a month after that, my local news channel out here had this little tiny segment. I don't watch the news, so I don't know why I even know this happened. I mean, I watched this little tiny story they were telling, but I don't know why I watched it, because it's not like they advertised that they were going to talk about this. So it just came on, and I happened to be on the channel. It was so weird. But they said a month after, they said the hobbies, and they grouped hobbies in the big, large sum that it is, any and everything hobby related, has skyrocketed 400%.
Oh, wow.
Just in the state, just in the city, or just in general in the country. A month after the pandemic hit, it jumped 100%, because a lot of people didn't have jobs because they had to wait for, the stores were closing, restaurants and all that stuff, and they didn't have nothing to do. They were stuck in their house, like you said. So what else could you do? Order online, pick up a hobby. So 400% it rose. And then the second part, it's so crazy to me to think that it did rise, because you hear constantly on the news how many businesses is closed, how many people got out of work. And then, I don't know what the rate is today, but the last time I watched the news, and like I said, I hardly ever watch it, so this was maybe 3 weeks ago, they said like around the total count of Americans that have died from this is like 500,000 people or something. And so with the constant people being sick, the constant people being out of work, it's crazy that hobbies in general are growing, because where are the people getting the money if they aren't working, or if they are stuck at home and don't have the income because they're stuck at home? I mean, I think most things have opened by now, but it only seems like the people that have still got to work, still didn't have any issue with the pandemic, are just going, I'm blowing my whole entire check. Let's buy everything.
Right.
Because the people that were out of work for 3 months, whether they were a waitress or whatever, they weren't buying hobby stuff. They didn't have the money to do it. They have, rent to pay, electrical to pay, groceries to buy. They weren't wasting money on that if they didn't have money to waste to begin with.
All the needs to sustain a good living.
Yeah, so it's so crazy to think that the hobbies in general rose 400%, because I think a good quarter of Americans in this country, probably the world, but mostly in this country, were out of work for a good 2 months, a quarter of them, because, food industry, waitressing and dishwashers and all that stuff, when they were closed, that takes up so many employees for just one company,
It does.
So, yeah, I mean, I was lucky enough, I got to bring my computer home and work from home. So it didn't bother me, except that I was able to build while I was working.
But oh no, we're not keeping a secret between us.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, it's just crazy, and it's good to see that the hobby was able to keep going and it didn't die out with a lot of companies that were dying out. But it's crazy just to think that who were the 400% of people that were keeping this going and exploded it to 400%.
Right.
But I'm thinking it's got to be that. Like, I got to work from home, and while I was working in the slow periods of work on the clock, I was just taking a car and building it real quick. So maybe they were doing the same thing, and that's how they were able to, saving gas, not having to go into work, saving money, not having to buy food at work or whatever. They use that to go buy their hobby stuff, whatever. I know I bought a bunch more stuff while I was at home and not wasting gas.
Right. So. And one of the things I tie on to this subject now that we're on it, before we move on, many modelers, like you said, would have projects just sitting on a shelf collecting dust. They're like, I'm going to get to it. I'm going to get to it. I'm going to get to it.
Right.
Then all of a sudden, with this pandemic hit, there would have been an increase in sales and just general parts and supplies and materials, because they're like, oh crap, now that I'm stuck at home, I got these projects lined up.
Yeah.
You know what? Now I got the time to do it, because like you said, a lot of, unfortunately, people were laid off from work, but it's like, as long as they had the money, they're like, hey, I can just do this, bypass my free time. And at least I got something that can keep me busy, until I'm called back to work, or until, okay, I can get another job somewhere,
Yeah. Exactly. I know one of the biggest hobby shops in the model car world, especially the lowrider model car world, is in California, called Pegasus Hobbies.
Okay.
And they created their own lowrider tires and wheels for the lowrider cars. They were the very first company to do so.
Right.
And they've made now all these tons of accessories. But I remember back in their heyday, way before the pandemic happened, it was like in the 90s, they moved to this big, huge 2-story building. And they custom built the building. So they had an RC track in the back. They actually had a life size, like a 1:1 to scale truck. I think it was like an off-roading, like Baja truck or something.
Wow.
Truck on the side of their building, looked like it crashed into their building, but an RC. So the tires were way oversized. The suspension was way oversized for the body of that Baja truck. And it was like angled halfway off the building, looked like it was jumping into the ground. And they since moved, and they moved in the middle of the pandemic. And I don't know why, because I know the model car world hasn't died, but they were a model. They were a hobby store for everything. They had trains, they had RCs, boats, planes, everything.
Right.
But they since moved, and unfortunately, I'm not out. I don't live out there no more, and I don't ever really go back out there, so I don't know the story behind it. But I think they moved into a smaller spot. And and I don't know why. I don't think the pandemic hurt their sales, but then maybe that's the one hobby store that did hurt their sales. I don't know.
Yeah, we would never know.
Right.
How many hobby stores are around here? There's a Gob, and we also got a couple model road clubs around here. We got a 3-Rail Lion-O club in central downtown. Well, that's on the south tip of downtown. We've got one out in Maryville, Illinois, and that's a 60 by 80 foot HO masterpiece that has the gentleman retired. He was I think he was an air flight medic. He basically wanted his dream to open up his own hobby shop. He does all trains, a little bit of RC too, and he's actually got an outdoor track as well. But in Maryville, Illinois, he's got more than 5,000 square feet of warehouse space and a 60 by 80 foot masterpiece HO railroad that you got many different Santa Fe, Union Pacific, BNSF, all those. But this is just a freelance. This isn't something like prototypical to any given area. It was just his dream of his that he wanted to get people involved with the hobby. And this layout, I think, is now 20 years old, still going strong.
Wow.
Well, unfortunately, with the pandemic, it's kind of been shut down for a little bit. We're still waiting on when he's going to open up. But he will have every third or fourth Sunday of the month, from a gap of 1 to 4 o'clock. He lets the public, the public, come in and run trains. You pay a few dollars, maybe. I think it's $2 to, just come in and watch. Just a courtesy donation.
Yeah.
But an extra $3, the volunteers there, that of course the train nuts around that help the gentleman out, and there's a bunch of them that helped them out throughout the years. They give anyone a throttle, and then they can basically run a train around the railroad however long they want to.
Oh, that's so neat. That's so cool.
And that's one way that it gets us kids younger than me now in the hobby.
Definitely.
And that
you can play with the train while you're
exactly,
watching and admiring.
Exactly. You're not just sitting there and you're not having the guys to where they won't, it's the aspect of, I want to say, customer service in a way. And I worked retail for 1.5 years. And if you don't try to, go up to someone new coming into this and offer like assistance or introduce them, maybe start talking with them and then saying, well, okay, here, you can give this a shot. How are they going to get involved? Exactly. I think that's the best way to get the kids involved is, if some certain train clubs or other guys just, meet people and then they get them down to their layouts, have them run the train. And I know that, matter of fact, there's a lot of kids up there that went back in the hobby store that he had. He had a bunch of train sets. There was one night he sold a train set to a kid who was maybe 5 or 6 years old. And he was all excited about going home and grabbing his mom and dad's hand and being like, well, come on, let's go. I want to set up my own train. And you know what? They're like, no, not so fast. We gotta open up slowly and check the directions, stuff like that. But I just think by doing that, it's going to keep our hobby up and keep it alive, keep it going.
I hope it does. I was talking to, who was I talking to? I was talking to somebody. I talked to a lot of people. And there's so much that I talk about that
Me too.
I don't remember who I talked to about it. But I was just talking and I said, I would love for hobbies in general, model trains, model cars, boat planes, whatever, rocket ships. I would love the hobby world to continue to grow and continue to last. But look at the amount of model railroaders today. What is the majority? Senior citizens. That is the majority. And then the middle-aged people, I'm 40. Ken is what, 50s, and Mike is in maybe 60s. I don't know.
Just around there.
Yeah. The middle age, there's less middle age than there are senior citizens. And then there's maybe 10% young adults. Maybe 15 to 20 at the very most. But
at the very
that's in the States. Now
yeah.
you look at the UK with Jennifer Kirk, and they got their darn hobby on TV, and their hobby isn't just a hobby. It's kind of like a family, thing that the whole family does. So their hobby, I can totally see lasting well into the future. I think our hobby in general in the next 40, 50 years is going to dwindle down to almost nothing. And I blame on two things. I blame the parents not getting their kids into it. I think the parents aren't into it at all either, though.
Right.
I'm a huge classic car guy. I've been around classic cars my whole life. I've been to car shows in Southern California. There's a car show every single weekend all year round. Every single weekend within 200 miles of where anybody lives. So you can go to a car show every single weekend, your whole entire life living out there. Out there, it's like the UK version of trains. The classic cars handed down into the family. It's a lifestyle. It's a culture. You live it. You love it. It's in your blood. You dress a certain way for the certain year of car you got. Say you got a 1950s car, you're going to dress like a greaser.
In the 1950s,
daily.
Yep.
Yeah, daily. And then if you got like a 1930s, you're probably not going to wear like a zoot suit or nothing. But at a car show, you would put that zoot suit on, represent your car in the time period it's from.
Of course.
And so out here on the East Coast, most of the car culture is senior citizens, and their kids aren't into it. So once they die, their car is going to be sold off to somebody, probably leave the state, maybe leave the country, go to a different country, who knows? And the car culture on the East Coast is so much smaller and dwindling daily that I don't think there's going to be much of a car culture at all in the next 20 years out here.
Right.
And then we go to like a cars and coffee show where it's like any kind of collector car or car to look at. So you got Mustangs, Corvettes, and Camaros and whatnot. And these younger kids, your age, my age, are bringing these new cars because they're not into the old cars. And it's really upsetting because I see that in this hobby. I see technology will probably in one way or another take over complete hobbies in our country altogether, and they won't probably be none in the next 40, 50, 60 years. I hope that doesn't happen, but
yeah, me too. I hope it doesn't.
I see that, if our senior citizens don't have family beneath them that are into the hobby, well, that hobby dies with them. And then their wife's stuck with it, or their kids are stuck with it, and they don't know anything about it. They don't care about it, so they'll just sell it off to whoever, whatever.
Right.
And then if their kids aren't into it, then their grandkids are definitely not going to be into it, because for what, that's what I see in the hobby, and I so hope it doesn't happen. And that's why I love talking to like you and the other three young adults that I interviewed, because listening to the passion you guys have is the same passion the adults have, the senior citizens have. And it's so rare to hear that passion in a young adult that's into the hobby or in hobbies in general, because there's video games out there that they could play. There's, other things that they can get into that has nothing to do with building a model railroading layout or something, And it's so upsetting to see more young kids not into it. But it's great to see, young adults that are into it. And then you were into it when you were a kid too. But I didn't know you then. So it's cool to know that you were into it and that you kept it going throughout your whole life so far.
I know.
You could have grown out of it easily, but you didn't.
Many people in my school, going back with my earlier life, many of my peers in elementary school had a train set. And then, of course, they went away with it at like 8, 9 years old, came into the sports athletics. But now, like you said, with also what everyone knows about the technology, iPhones, iPads, stuff like that, they just got into that. But it's like, what use does that do? Because all you're doing is sitting on a couch and, I don't know, staring at the screen for so many hours a day. I know.
Right. TikTok is horrible, and I don't even use it.
No. Okay,
my daughter uses it daily.
I use Snapchat, I use Facebook, and I used Instagram for a while, but I deleted it because it was like, I don't like the platform and such. But TikTok, I try to just stay away from that platform as much as I can. But again, with having the World of Mile Trains right here in my basement, and to the status that I've got now, and of me still being hot and heavy into it, I'm now involved in a giant live steam club. I was also in another club that I was in for 8 years. We recently had a rip apart track, unfortunately. We were the 7.5-inch gauge St. Louis Live Steamers. So you can check us out online on our website. We're trying to locate a new place. Now I'm at a 12-inch foot scale grand steam train that we run a 2-mile stretch down one of the rivers here in the St. Louis area. Like, we parallel the river, and then you've got the bluffs on the one end, and then you've got a beginning of a park to where you board. It's the Wabash, Frisco, and Pacific in Glencoe, Missouri. You can just type in WFPRR.com or .org, and that'll, of course, take you to our website. I just became a member there, and they run like a real railroad. So every Sunday of the month, from the time of April to October, every Sunday from like 12:15 to 4:30, everyone is invited to come and ride trains. Now, with the pandemic going on, we unfortunately had to shut down. So for right now, we are still in the wind if we're going to be able to open up this year. There has been some plans, but nothing really has come into the works just yet. So we still got to be determined on that decision.
Yeah. Well, I'll have a link to that website in the description below for anybody who's watching or listening. Go to the description and they'll have a link to that, because that sounds so cool. That it's a life-size train, or it's the live steamer size train?
It's not the pro. It's like a miniature, like you see at a carnival that you can sit right on at a carnival.
Oh, okay.
But they are live steam powered locomotives.
Oh, that's neat.
Live steam locomotives. Really cool. They got boiler pressure of 120, 130 psi running in them. We've got.
See, that's so much better than like a gas or propane powered piece of junk that you see at a maybe carnival or a museum, like a transportation museum in St. Louis.
Right. We do have a couple diesel engines that we got a Jeep 9 and we got an FA Alco that are again gas powered engines. But everyone wants to use a steam train, and the big one we've got is a 42 Mountain, which I think the thing is about more than. I think around 20 feet long, tender and engine in total. Just about. It's just a rough estimate. I don't know for sure on the specs because I
even if it was a couple feet shorter, that's still a huge engine.
It is. That is one of our pride and joys of the railroad. And of course, when we would be running the public on the Sundays that we operate, you see all the young kids sitting there looking at it. And the point of a steam engine is that shows you the real railroading, because you got all the moving parts on the outside versus a diesel engine. It's all internal. You got a shell with the railroad, the number on the cab, and then the color scheme on it, and that's it. And then you got occasionally the black soot and exhaust that comes out when the engineer decides to throw it into full notch 8.
Right.
And say, the heck with this, we got to get out of here, got to get rolling.
Maybe you can help me with this. I know they don't make it and it's completely impractical, but I want somebody to make it. I want somebody to make a turbine diesel engine with the exhaust that come out of the back upwards, but you sit right in front of it and control it. So you're getting a constant turbine heat blowing in your face the whole time.
That is a real good idea, but I don't know.
Because you wouldn't sit in front. That wouldn't make any sense to be behind the turbine. You got to sit right in front of it.
Right. No, they have made turbine models. In fact, Scale Trains is one to make that giant 3-piece Union Pacific turbine engine where you had the front unit, the middle with the turbine motor inside of it, and then you had a fuel tender on the back. Those only worked a few years in service, and they went out. There's only a couple in existence. I think the number 18. Well, I actually saw one of them out in a trip to Utah. We were out in Ogden, Utah, coming back, and we stopped there at the museum, the railroad museum there. And I also found one of the Amtrak locomotives that was a well-known at the time before the F40PHs rolled in earlier, as I was explained before with the Grand Canyon, that they got a couple of those. The SDP40Fs were a 6-axle workhorse of Amtrak. We'll put it that way. You can Google it, YouTube SDP40F Amtrak, and it's going to pull up all the information about it. Those locomotives were okay for a time, but I heard that history goes in the late 70s, when the cold winter, there was like a cold vortex that came through, and many states in the cold zones got blasted by 1.5 feet, 2 feet of snow and terrible cold. There was the old steam heating equipment on the passenger cars, because of course Amtrak was one company created by the U.S. government to prevent railroads from dropping out from bankruptcy, of drawing out from passenger service at the time.
I did not know
That's
that.
why Amtrak was formed, so the government took it into their own hands. Those locomotives were great, but unfortunately they had a lot of issues with it, and one being they weren't kept up with the new technology. And I saw the last remaining SDP40F at that museum, painted in the Maersk Sealand scheme. I also saw, again, the 3-piece turbine unit. I saw another one of the Union Pacific Northern locomotives, like the 844, and saw a lot of other different, historical pieces of the Union Pacific. And I just thought that was pretty cool. I didn't want to leave that museum. I told my mother and father, hey, if they have a stay the overnight program, I'm staying.
Right. Yeah.
I'm just going to camp out here.
Yeah, if they got a cot and a sink, I'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool. So I don't know trains nearly as much as I know cars, but I know at the St. Louis Museum, Train Museum or Transportation Museum, there is a concept train that uses bus frame, like full-on buses, automobile.
The aerotrain. That's what you're talking about.
Yes, that's not a turbine though, right? Or is it a turbine?
No,
okay.
it was.
It looks space age turbine.
Oh, okay. It's supposed to. The GM designers, and that one, there's a YouTube video to where there's a local news station here called KETC Channel 9, and they did a documentary on the aerotrain. That was a 1950s, to where they were trying to compete with the new air travel, and then of course the vehicles starting, new highway system being built after the war. And they, of course, like you said, took the bus bodies off the Greyhounds and then put it on steel wheels on steel rails. They made only a couple train sets. In fact, I think the Rock Island and Pennsylvania were two railroads I know that experimented with them, but they just didn't ride fine. I mean, the style was nice.
Yeah, no, I heard we took that little tiny train that circles, that little key train that they have out there. And they talked about it very briefly, and they said the ride on it was so bumpy. They couldn't figure out the suspension on it at all, and they put an air ride on it, is what I understood. But I bet you back then it just wasn't up to par, because I've also heard from the volunteers, of course, going up there so many times in my life, that they said that passengers would almost be like they throw it up through the ceiling, and that's how bumpy. That is how bumpy it was. So that's a testament to the people laying the track. They should have figured out a better, smoother track for that to run on.
I know, they should.
Better than, I mean, the suspension probably could have been fine on the train if the track was good enough.
Right.
Take it to Japan where the bullet trains are, and then it'll probably ride like butter.
Yeah, they got the engineer right.
Yeah, that's neat. So you mentioned it a little bit, we talked about it a little bit, but your live steamer, that steamer club that you're in, you have a live steamer train engine. Is it a steam or is it diesel?
Well, it's just a gas-powered diesel engine. Just something small to start off with.
I remember, I think Ken showed it on one of his episodes, or maybe I didn't see it at all, but I thought I saw pictures of your steam or your diesel engine.
You did.
Is it 4 wheels with trucks, or is it or not trucks, but like Is it just four wheels, or does the wheels connect like a steam engine wheel? I don't.
No, it's just the wheels.
Oh, okay. What am I thinking then? I feel like I seen something that has four wheels with the steam engine arms on it, and
the connecting rods. Those were 45, not 45 tonner, 44 tonner Whitcomb switchers is what they were. I don't know why they had the rods on there, but as you see behind the rods, those big metal, what they look like, I don't know what they look like giant circles that you'd see it spin around. Those are actually counterweights to keep the engine weighed down, because I think as small as they were built, there wasn't enough weight from the engines that it would probably jump the track periodically. At least that's what I got. And if I'm wrong, I'm okay to be corrected. I'll probably just do some more information now that I've said that and try to confirm my findings at a later date. But yeah, it's just a small little 4-axle, supposed to replicate a little Plymouth, so like an industrial switcher used in like a coal mine or, something small like that. I've saved the motor because the motor's about 20 years old. Nice little 3-horsepower Briggs & Stratton. Going to put a air horn on it, but I'm trying to go through it to make sure it's mechanically sound first. And then, although our track's ripped up from the club that I'm part of, there's a couple gentlemen in the area, the general area of downtown St. Louis and then beyond in the far counties, that they've got their own private tracks that I'll probably call one of the guys up in the club and see if he'll let me take it on his track for the time being and give it a test run. I'll probably look at Ken and say, hey, make this be a little What's Neat segment to where we'll kind of branch out into the big live steam scale with the guys hand built, or they might have
considered it's still in the realm of hobbies. I mean, it's just a much bigger hobby. So,
and more expensive too.
Yeah, the What's Neat show is what's neat in the hobby. So boom.
Exactly.
It may not be what everybody's into, but it's still model railroading in general.
Yes.
It's a much bigger model.
Right.
And heavier one.
Oh, yes. Heavier, that is.
So I don't know the specifics of your house. I know you have a basement because that's where you're in and that's where your layout is. Does your land where you're at right now offer you any kind of room to put like even a straightaway track that's maybe 20 feet or 30 feet long so you can run that thing back and forth?
Oh, outside, I don't know if my subdivision will be happy with that. I'm kind of in a neighborhood to where we got kind of just, general subdivision rules kind of set up and some county restrictions in place that if I probably
maybe not even in the backyard?
Oh, in the backyard.
Behind the house where nobody can see?
I mean, now that you say that, that might be a good idea. Just take the tracks, and if my parents ask me what I'm doing, I'll just say, I'm mowing the grass or I'm doing some yard work.
Right.
Don't bother.
Because, I mean, if you even had like 10 feet, I mean, it would be a little short, but you could still get that thing running back and forth and you would be able to hear it, see it moving and probably try to fix and tinker on making sure that thing was really, really good and running smooth. Than if you just had to like lift it in the air and let it run, with no track or whatever. But that gave you the opportunity to have the weight of the engine moving the wheels and seeing it work in actual operation than just maybe sitting on two seesaws and just letting the wheels run freely. I don't know.
I hear what you're saying. But like I said, hopefully I told Ken, when I get a hold of that gentleman, I will see if he'll let me bring him along and we can do a What's Neat segment on that. He can basically hold the camera while I'm driving it around.
Right. He can be the cameraman this time.
Yeah, here. I'll be the cameraman. You just pull that lever back because it's just two levers. One lever on the left controls the direction on the gearbox, and the one on the right, you push it forward and it's a throttle, and then you release it and it's spring loaded. It flies back and the brakes. There's actually brake shoes on the wheels themselves.
Wow.
So there's a legit like braking mechanism that was built on this engine from the gentleman I got it from, that when you just let the thing go, let the throttle handle go, it just stops. The shoes go on the wheels.
Oh, so it's automatic. You don't even got to like literally push another lever or something. It's just let go.
No, it's automatic. Two levers, one on the left, one on the right.
That's actually really cool. That was a smart idea on his end.
It was.
How fast does that, or do you know, how fast is that thing able to
no, without having a track, I couldn't honestly tell you. But most of those small engines, and with being part of that club, we have an F7 diesel that we'd only pull out. So if our steamers were backed up or we had like a lot of people that would show up on our Saturday, we'd run one Saturday a month at that club. Then now the other one that I talked about up in Glencoe, Missouri, and that one, again, depending on situation with this pandemic, if we're going to be able to run this season, they would run every Sunday. Whereas this other club that I'm part of, we'd run one Saturday out of the month. And if our steamers got backed up and if it was a nice day, at the front of the park, there was a pavilion in the county that we were set up at in the park that we were at. So every time I drive by, going there at like 9 o'clock in the morning to get set up to get ready to run at 12, or I think it was like 11 we started, you get people that would start coming back. And I can remember the one time that there was a kid that came back, and then all of a sudden he looked at all the steamers going around the track, because we had like a giant loop just going around the back of the park. He ran back, and all of a sudden there was a crowd of 30 more people that just showed up. And they all looking at him like, what's all this? And then they looked at me, they saw my work shirt, and I had my radio on and my hat, and my badge, or my name tag rather, for the club. And they're like, whoa, can we take a ride? I said, I'll tell you what, head over to that line right there, free train rides, donations are accepted, not required. Go take as many laps as you wander around on the little train.
That's cool.
So, yeah. I would say that little diesel, Michael, 8 miles per hour, tops, maybe 9.
That's
if
not
I tune the
bad,
carburetor right.
That's not bad. I mean, heck, if you just got, a car behind it that you sit on and you control it with the engine car and you just roll around the track, that's a nice, lazy, kind of relaxing, little afternoon that you could definitely have with your little engine.
Yeah.
And then you're around all those other model or railroaders that have, their engines out that, you guys are just cruising around.
Yeah, we're just cruising around trying to have a good time is all.
Yeah, my parents, they bought a house out in this city called Riverside, California, and they live on a street that at the time pretty much dead-ended into a park. But now the city had rearranged the street and rearranged the park and whatnot. But it's a Life Steamers park. It was probably, I don't want to make it sound bigger than it is, but it was probably a quarter of a mile blockwise, and then a quarter of a mile blockwise, and then they had the narrow track and then the regular track all going around. They used to have a tunnel, but they had closed the tunnel down by the time we moved out there. So the track kind of went, I think, over the tunnel at that time. But the tunnel had like this brick archway and then these wrought iron gates down, looked like a dungeon. And I always thought, how cool would that be if it was still open? But yeah, I know why they closed it, because people were doing stupid stuff in there when the park wasn't open.
Right.
But I always remember, you have the diesel engine guys and then you have the steam engine guys, and I was always waiting for that steam engine to come in so I can ride on that thing, not on the actual engine, just be pulled by it basically, because they just look so much cooler. All the moving mechanisms on the outside, they sound, the
melody of the steam whistle, that's what gets everyone, is they would hear it in the movies, the videos, but to actually go to a club that operates these things, and then with just having knowledge, and all of us guys there, we basically know trains. That's one of the requirements to join this. Real
trains, because the thing works like a real train.
Exactly.
It's just miniaturized, so it's perfect.
And when you get someone to say, I remember seeing a steam train when I was a kid, or, and to be like, well, here's just it's sized down, but this is basically the workings of it. Yeah. And as knowledgeable as I am in it, everyone knows that. We were there at the members run back in October, and a couple of the public was interested in knowing what it was. So I was kind of showing this family of how the engine works and whatnot. And then I looked at the young kid and I said, would you like to take a seat on the engine? And he's like, kind of like hugging toward mother a little bit. And I looked at her and I said, ma'am, as long as he doesn't touch anything, on the boiler or any of the throttles, levers, something like that, he can sit on the seat. And then he put on an engineer's cap for him. And then I was like, you pull that cord right here. So I kind of grabbed his hand, pulled the cord. And he's like, whoa, the whistle. And then he's like, can I do it again? It's like, sure, and to take it and toot it some more. And, that's cool. It. Yeah.
That's what's so great. Like even with, a small scale like HO or N scale or bigger, just if you can light up somebody's day, from a little kid to an adult, just with the knowledge you give them or the opportunity you give them, I mean, that's like the greatest thing ever.
It
It
is.
really, because hopefully that young kid will grow up, because maybe the opportunity you gave him to blow the whistle to maybe get into the hobby later on in life, maybe something
Probably.
their parents couldn't figure out how to give them, so they just took them to a park and you gave them this opportunity. It's like, I love that sound, now I want to hear it for the rest of my life, kind of thing, or something. Who knows?
Right.
I
Right.
don't know, but that's so neat that you did that. I have one small, minuscule pet peeve about live steamers. There
What's
are
that?
the very few that'll take a steam engine, and I usually see it on the narrow gauge or the smaller gauge, that they'll run that damn steam engine like a Lionel train at full speed. Looks like you're right back in the UK or something, going 100 miles an hour. And I look at that, and I'm thinking, are you trying to keep up with the bigger ones? Why are you running this thing so
It's
quick?
like, hey, it's
The
not
things are going to
possible
fly
now.
off of it and break.
Make it a little engine that could. Trying to catch
Yeah,
up with the big ones.
right. Because in real life, that train would never run that quick, not at 120 miles an hour in
No, it
scale.
wouldn't.
So why are you running it like this?
Right. Right.
But it is funny. And the funniest things, so that's a pet peeve. I don't like it when live steamers do that to their steam engines. And then a funny thing is when you see an oversized guy, real oversized, running on that narrow gauge track. And you're like, how are you even on this thing? How has it not tipped you off and you not fall off and roll? Because they're much bigger than the track.
Right.
Much
Right.
wider in every way. That's the funny point. But yeah, anyways, that's cool. I know growing up next to that park, they would have it once a month, I think on a Sunday or something. And I'd go out as many times as I could. And I always liked going out there and watching it and thinking, man, it would be so cool to join a club and buy a train and bring it out here to this track and run it. But, HO was a lot of money. Even though it's not a lot of money, it's a lot of money. There was no way I was going to be able to afford that thing. And I would have wanted a steam engine. I
Right.
wouldn't have wanted a diesel. So I wouldn't have settled for a diesel. I would have waited and spent way too much money and probably been homeless and broke. And, it would have been my drug that,
Right. Who knows?
sent me over the edge. That's cool, man. That's cool. I like that you are into like different scales. You got the live steamer, you got the HO stuff. You're very techie. That's super cool because, like I told you before, there's not that many young adults that are truly into it and have the passion that you do. So it's cool that you've branched out in the different scales. I mean, hell, you could, you know, with a layout, wire up a whole N scale because it's no different, the layout wiring portion, from an N scale to an HO. So, I mean, you're
Right.
not limited to just one scale for electrical wise. So you're good there. It's just cool to talk to people that have the passion for the hobby, especially a young adult like yourself, because there's just not enough of you guys out there. And if there are, they're not visually out there for people to really know them. Like you're on that What's Neat show every other week or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not behind the camera, you can be in front of the camera. People know of you, people see you at the model shows or whatever. And you're very nice, which is really cool. The other people that might be in it, maybe they're just on Facebook and you got to be in that certain group to know that they exist,
Right.
So
I understand. Yep.
they're just not enough of the young people out there that we really need. And I hope with people seeing you, maybe the young adults that catch the What's Neat show and the few people that ever see this podcast, like this many people, maybe we'll hear your story and be like, oh, I got to get my kids into this. He's into it. They
I
could
hope so.
definitely be into it.
Yeah, anyone could be into it. All you gotta
Anybody
do is
could,
just start out
and
small.
everybody should. I mean, and just in general, just hobbies in general, models, trains, planes, boats, helicopters, whatever. I mean, even those rocket ships that go 100 feet in the air. That's a hobby that a lot of people are into. I'm not
Yes.
into it, but I mean, it just needs to be out there. More people need to be into hobbies. More younger people to keep hobbies alive.
Right.
But yeah, if you can send me a link to that your club website or club's website that you're part of, I'll put all that in the description for everybody to be able to see. Other than that, man, I'm kind of out of subjects. You got anything else you want to talk about?
No, sir, I do not. Hey, I appreciate it again for letting me be on this show. It was a real honor.
Definitely. I'm so happy that you were on the show because I said you're like the fourth young adult I've talked to. Everybody else is old. My age or older, so it's good to hear from a younger person's perspective on the hobby.
Mm-hmm.
It's great.
I'm going to keep it going as long as I can.
That's awesome. That's the best thing, really. That truly is the best thing. Well, if you want to stay on real quick and we'll say our goodbyes, and I'll just tell everybody, hey, I hope you like this episode. You know what to do. If you like it, subscribe if you haven't subscribed, comment on it. Daniel will chime in, or I'll chime in, or whatever if you have any questions on it. And if you haven't already, every episode has a link to my Patreon. There's not very many of you. And when I mean not very many, there's one of you. So if more of you want to join on this Patreon, click that link in the description because it'll be there.
Down below.
That'll help the podcast grow bigger. Other than that, you guys have a great day, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Right now.
Yeah, it's recording now, so go ahead.
Okay. All right, everyone. So it's me again. We had just finished our podcast. Thank you, Mr. Dennehy. So now I want to briefly show you what I've got here as my layout. It is currently an 11 by 6 foot walk around oval. I've got 2 main lines, 1 inside line. And as you see right here, we got a little yard for classification. And I'm also getting into all the operating aspects. So using these car cards and waybills to kind of operate the layout and move the cars at a certain point on the railroad. And as we go along here, more my yard. And I still got more scenery work to do, but that'll come here in the future. There's more of it here. A little caboose track where I store all my cabooses. And then I've got a track coming off the back end of the yard here. And I've got it going up an incline. And we've got a little industrial town that I'm building. So I can actually have some little switching operations with maybe a warehouse here and then a grain elevator over there. And then I can have those cars, brought down to the main yard and then shuttled into a mainline train that I can take running around my layout and then come back, switch it all out and do it all again. So, of course, here's a tunnel I've got. And as we come around here, here's a little lift out section. And this is not finished by any means. I still got more work to do on it. At least I got the scenery down and everything else is all cut up on it for right now. And also one other thing I want to mention, I got the signaling system. So I actually got train signals that operate, but I don't have any toggle switches. So you're probably wondering, how do I activate them? See those right there? They're infrared sensors. When I run over, the light changes automatically once the train runs over. And now if you take a look here, you might be able to see it go into a sequence where it should go to yellow, flash, and then go to green. Okay, and that is if, let's see.
If it wants to work.
I think, well, no, I actually got a second set right over here, and these two are tied in together. The system has a pair of wires going to the 2 boards driving these signals that without it being in the second block. All right, I think that should work. Oh, there it is. So as you see here, it changed. This is all automatic, and it's its own separate system. So you got the flashing restriction, and then it should pop the green here shortly.
Oh, wow.
There you go. Automated signaling and everything. Now, here is the workbench. And this is, of course, it's a little bit dark here. I don't have the lights turned on. Hopefully you guys can see it. It's a bit of a mess right now, but this is where all the behind the scenes locomotive repairs and the other projects that I do get serviced. And of course, I got a nice little tool rack here. I got to organize again. I got several locomotive projects, still waiting for decoders and stuff like that on the shelves. Also got many drawers, miscellaneous tools, stuff like that. Got a little test track back here so I can test all my decoder installations and check to make sure locomotives are working. I've got this going to a computer on this track, and this is where I can do all the computer programming on this track with the certain DCC sound decoders. And then here's the accumulation of miscellaneous parts. I got wires here. I've got some lights here. And I've got all the kind of odds and ends to make one of my decoder installs. And then here's the other end of the bench. And it's kind of a cluster.
I think most of our benches are clusters.
I know. And so here's another thing I got here. With me doing operations, I kind of came up with this little thing for the engine facility. And as being a mechanic, I thought to myself, I got to kind of be creative with how I do this. So I decided to make this whiteboard where, I got locomotives on the different tracks and I can see if they're getting serviced. There's this key up here. So you've got blue as being serviced, so that means they're being worked on. You've got green as standby, so that means that they could be ready to roll out. Red is out of service, and then the black listing will mean that they're ready. So I got a couple still in the shop, and it looks like I got 2 that are ready to go, and 1 is out of service for right now. So again, that's just with the operation aspect.
That's crazy. It's cool, but it's crazy.
And then here's a wall of some railroad signs. And there's the Grand Canyon sign of the trip that I talked about here on your podcast. And I got that at the souvenir store before we left. And a couple other miscellaneous signs here and there. And here's also some other older trains that I've had in the past. Some of those were my father's. And so I decided, you know what, it might not be best to screw around with it, maybe put the or at least try to put the electronics into it, but to just lay it here on the shelf above my current layout.
I think the coolest thing on your layout is that big yellow box that says Big Boy on it.
Oh, that.
I mean, in my personal opinion.
Yes, like I do have the 4014 Big Boy with the Tsunami 2 sound in it. And this is the new release to celebrate the Great Race to Promontory, where the UP 844 and the Big Boy came nose to nose to celebrate 150 years of the Golden Spike being driven into the ground for the Transcontinental Railroad being completed.
They had a Big Boy version of that come out?
Yes, they did. And
I didn't know that. That's cool.
It's right over here somewhere. I might need to turn this back again. Let me go over and see. Da-da-da-da. Here, let's see if I can get it. There it is. Yeah, it's a little bit dusty, but it'll all brush off. But yeah, Athen did a nice job on it, and I can also put in 2 smoke generators in the stacks here, so I can actually have smoke coming out of the stack when it's running.
That's awesome.
Sound, lights, and everything. So that's pretty much it.
I never knew they recreated that Golden Spike scene with 2 Big Boys or 2 big
They never
teams.
recreated it. It's just the engine that they recreated.
I got you. It's still really cool that they did that, though.
I know. It is. It is.
That's neat. Right on. That's a cool little layout. I mean, it's not huge in any way, but it's not small. And you got a lot going on there, which makes a really neat little, layout. I mean, you can do so much little things on there that, if you had like an 8x4 plywood and you just jammed a bunch of crap on there, you wouldn't be able to have, as neat as a little layout as you got on there. Because I even like that lifted part that goes up that you can. I mean, there's a lot of little detail spots on there that you can do so much stuff with. That's cool.
Yeah, I know. There's still more tweaking I got to do, and like I said, the scenery work. I got to have Mr. Rice come over and entertain me, or not entertain me, but instruct me on how to do proper scenery techniques. So we'll go on with that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Sam, it was great
cool,
to be on your show. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, man, definitely. This was great. I appreciate you showing your layout to everybody. It's all good, man. It's all good. So yeah, I'll have those links in the description. Hope you guys like it. We'll see you on the next episode.
All right.
All right. So that was Daniel Coombs. Daniel Coombs. Coombs. I think he said Coombs. Anyways, that was Daniel, model railroader, hobbyist, and live steamer. That's a pretty cool hobby right there, live steam. I pretty much knew from watching the What's Neat show that we mentioned over and over again, a lot about Daniel, but not nearly this much. And this was really cool because, like what this podcast is for, it's to get the viewers to understand and know the modeler. And I think we did a pretty good job on this episode, getting to know Daniel, because he's a pretty cool kid. I mean, young adult, into the hobby, has a huge passion for it. What more could you ask for? But yeah, I hope you guys liked it. It was pretty interesting. I liked it. So, like I said, I hope you guys like it. And yeah, till next episode. See you guys later.